The afternoon sun beat down on the dusty boardwalk of Yosemite, California. When Nathan Vance first saw her sitting alone outside the mercantile, her face twisted in concentration as she struggled with two needles and a tangle of yarn that looked more like a bird's nest than anything resembling proper knitting. It was late August in 1878, and the mining town nestled in the Sierra Nevada foothills was buzzing with the usual chaos of prospectors, merchants, and drifters passing through on their way to fortune or ruin. Nathan had ridden in from his ranch 20 miles north to pick up supplies and check on cattle prices, but something about the young woman's determined expression made him pause mid-step. She had auburn hair pinned back in a simple style that was already coming loose in the heat, and her dress, though clean and well-mended, had seen better days. What struck him most was the fierce independence in her posture, the way she sat straight-backed despite the frustration evident in every line of her body as she tried to force the yarn to obey her will. He watched for a moment longer than was probably polite as she dropped one of the needles for what must have been the 10th time, judging by the exasperation on her face. The needle clattered against the wooden boards, and she let out a breath that was almost a growl before bending to retrieve it. When she sat back up, their eyes met, and Nathan felt something shift in his chest, an unexpected recognition that left him momentarily breathless. "Afternoon," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Looks like you were having a time of it there." Her cheeks flushed pink, though whether from embarrassment or the heat, he could not tell. "I am teaching myself," she said, her voice carrying a hint of defiance that suggested she expected him to mock her efforts. "My mother was supposed to teach me, but she passed before she could. I found her old needles and yarn in a trunk, and I thought it could not be that difficult, but apparently I was wrong." Nathan heard the grief beneath her words, recognized it because he carried his own. His father had died 3 years back, leaving him a ranch and responsibilities he had barely been ready for at 22. Now, at 25, he understood loss in a way that changed a man. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the empty space beside her on the bench. She looked at him with surprise, her hazel eyes searching his face for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her because she nodded. "I suppose. Though I warn you, I am terrible company right now. I have been sitting here for 2 hours and have nothing to show for it except sore fingers and wounded pride." Nathan settled onto the bench, setting his hat on his knee. "What are you trying to make?" "A scarf," she said. It seemed like the simplest thing to start with. Just a long rectangle of stitches. But I cannot even manage to cast on properly. The yarn keeps twisting, and when I think I have it right, the stitches slide off the needle. "I do not know much about knitting," Nathan admitted, "but I do know about learning difficult things. Sometimes it helps to have someone sit with you while you figure it out. 2 pairs of eyes and all that." She studied him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing whether to trust him or send him on his way. Finally, she gave a small nod. "I am Hannah Ashford. I came to Yosemite 3 months ago from Pennsylvania after my mother died. My uncle owns the boarding house on 3rd Street, and he took me in. He means well, but he doesn't understand why I want to learn this. He says there are women in town who could teach me, but this was my mother's yarn, her needles. I want to figure it out myself, to feel close to her somehow." "Nathan Vance," he replied. "I run a cattle ranch north of here." "I understand about wanting to do things yourself. My father left me his ranch, and everyone in town had advice about how I should run it. Sometimes you need to figure things out your own way, even if it is harder." Hannah's expression softened. "Exactly. You understand." "Show me what you have been trying to do," Nathan said. "Maybe talking through it will help." She picked up the needles again, her movements tentative. "The book I found says to make a slip knot first, then cast on the stitches. I can manage the slip knot, but then everything falls apart." She demonstrated, creating a neat loop and sliding it onto one needle. "See? That part works fine. But then when I try to cast on the first real stitch, it all goes wrong." Nathan leaned closer, watching her hands. They were small but capable looking, with calluses that suggested she was no stranger to hard work. "What does the book say to do next?" It says to hold the working yarn in my left hand and use the right needle to pull loops through, but I cannot make sense of how the loop is supposed to form. There are illustrations, but they are not very clear. She showed him a worn book with faded diagrams that looked like they had been drawn by someone who assumed the reader already knew what they were doing. That does not help much, Nathan agreed. But look, you have got the first loop on the needle. That is a start. What if you just try the next step very slowly and I will watch? Sometimes explaining what you are doing out loud helps you see where it goes wrong. Hannah took a breath and positioned the needles carefully. The book says to insert the right needle into the loop from front to back, then wrap the yarn around the right needle and pull it through. Her tongue poked out slightly as she concentrated, a gesture Nathan found inexplicably charming. She managed to get the right needle through the loop, but when she tried to wrap the yarn, everything twisted in the wrong direction. "Hold on," Nathan said gently. "Before you wrapped the yarn, everything looked right. Do that part again and stop before wrapping." She started over, and this time Nathan watched more carefully. When she reached the same point, he said, "Now wrap the yarn, but do it away from you, over the top of the needle. You were going toward yourself before." Hannah adjusted her movement, and this time when she pulled the new loop through, it looked almost right. Her eyes widened. It worked! I mean, it is not perfect, but that actually looked like what the drawing shows. "Do it again," Nathan encouraged. "See if you can repeat it." For the next several minutes, they sat together in companionable concentration while Hannah worked through casting on stitches. Some attempts were more successful than others, and twice she had to start completely over when the stitches became too tight or too loose, but Nathan noticed she was learning. Her movements grew more confident, and the line of frustration between her eyebrows eased. The sun shifted lower in the sky, painting the buildings of Yosemite in shades of gold and amber. People passed by on the boardwalk, casting curious glances at the cowboy, and the young woman bent over their knitting project, but Nathan barely noticed. He was caught up in watching Hannah's face as she worked, the way her expression shifted from determination to delight when a stitch formed correctly, the small smile that played at the corners of her mouth when she completed a whole row without dropping anything. "There," she said finally, holding up her work. She had perhaps 20 stitches cast on, uneven but recognizable. "It is not much, but it is more than I managed all morning." "It is a good start," Nathan said. "You should be proud of yourself." Hannah looked at him, and something warm flickered in her eyes. "Thank you. I know you probably have better things to do than sit here watching me fumble with yarn, but your presence helped more than you know. Just having someone believe I could figure it out made a difference." Nathan realized he had been sitting on this bench for over an hour when he had meant to pick up his supplies and head back to the ranch before dark. He should have been annoyed at the lost time, but instead he felt a strange reluctance to leave. "What happens now?" he asked. "Do you know how to do the actual knitting part?" Hannah's face fell slightly. "That is the next challenge. The book shows how to knit the stitches once they are cast on, but I imagine it will be just as confusing as this was. When are you planning to work on it next?" "Tomorrow, I suppose. I help my uncle with the boarding house in the mornings, but my afternoons are usually free. I will probably be right back here on this bench, fighting with these needles again." Nathan made a decision that surprised him even as the words left his mouth. "What if I came back tomorrow? I need to stay in town tonight anyway to meet with a buyer in the morning, and I could stop by in the afternoon. If you want company while you work on the next part, that is." Hannah's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I would like that very much, but only if you are sure. I do not want to impose on your time." "You are not imposing," Nathan said firmly. "Truth is, I spend most of my time alone on the ranch or talking business with other ranchers. This is the most interesting conversation I've had in months." They made plans to meet the next afternoon at the same spot, and Nathan finally collected his supplies and headed to the boarding house where he kept a room when business required him to stay overnight in town. As he lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of Yosemite settling into evening, he kept seeing Hannah's face, the way her whole being had lit up when she finally got those stitches right. He told himself it was just kindness, helping someone who was struggling, but he knew it was more than that. Something about Hannah Ashford had reached past all his carefully maintained walls and sparked to life an interest he had not felt in years. The next afternoon found Nathan finishing his business earlier than expected, his mind wandering during the discussion of cattle prices and shipping routes. The buyer noticed his distraction and made a knowing comment about a pretty girl, which Nathan neither confirmed nor denied. But as soon as the meeting concluded, he found himself walking quickly toward the mercantile. Hannah was already there, sitting in the same spot with her knitting in her lap and a look of intense concentration on her face. She had not seen him yet, and Nathan took a moment to observe her unnoticed. She had made an effort with her appearance today, he noticed. Her hair was neatly pinned, and she wore a dress of soft blue that brought out the color in her eyes. The sight made his heart beat a little faster. "Good afternoon," he said, and watched pleasure bloom across her face when she looked up and saw him. "You came back," she said, and there was relief in her voice that made him wonder if she had doubted he would. "Said I would," Nathan replied, settling onto the bench beside her. "How is the project going?" "I've been trying to do the actual knitting," Hannah said, "and it is every bit as frustrating as I expected. I managed to do 3 stitches before everything fell apart. Look." She showed him the needles, where a messy attempt at knitting had left the yarn in knots. Nathan suppressed a smile at her obvious frustration. "Start fresh. Show me what you're trying to do." Hannah carefully cast on a row of stitches, her movements more confident than yesterday. Nathan felt an odd pride watching her, as if her success was somehow his own. Once she had a working row, she picked up the second needle and consulted her book. "It says to insert the right needle into the first stitch, wrap the yarn around, pull through, and slip the old stitch off, but when I try it, everything tangles." "Do it slowly," Nathan said, "one step at a time." They worked through it together, Nathan watching over her shoulder, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of lavender in her hair. It took several attempts and a few false starts, but eventually Hannah managed to complete a stitch that looked more or less correct. She made a small sound of triumph that made Nathan laugh. "There you go," he said. "Do it again." They spent the next 2 hours working through the basics of knitting. Nathan learned that he had a surprising patience for this kind of detailed work, perhaps because he enjoyed watching Hannah's growing confidence more than he wanted to admit. She was a quick learner once she understood the mechanics, and her earlier frustration transformed into focused determination. As they worked, they talked. Nathan learned that Hannah was 22, that she had grown up in a small town in Pennsylvania where her mother had run a dressmaking business after Hannah's father died when she was young. Hannah had helped with the sewing and developed skill with her needle, but her mother had always promised to teach her to knit someday, and then there had been no more somedays. "She caught a fever last winter," Hannah said quietly, her needles stilling for a moment. "She was gone within a week. Everything happened so fast. One day we were planning what fabrics to order for spring, and then she was just gone. The house belonged to her employer, and I had nowhere to go. My uncle wrote and offered me a home here. I'd never been west of Pittsburgh, but I took the train as far as it would go and then a stagecoach the rest of the way. I've been here 3 months now, and I'm still not sure if Yosemite feels like home, but at least I have family." "I'm sorry about your mother," Nathan said. "Losing a parent changes everything." "It does," Hannah agreed. "Tell me about your father. You said he left you the ranch?" Nathan found himself talking about things he rarely discussed. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to rope cattle before he could properly read, about his father's steady presence and the way everything had felt manageable when his father was alive. He talked about the loneliness of the past 3 years, running the ranch alone, making decisions that affected not just himself but also the 5 men who worked for him and depended on the ranch for their livelihoods. "Do you have other family?" Hannah asked. "A sister," Nathan said. "She is married and lives in Sacramento now. We write occasionally, but we were never particularly close. She hated ranch life and could not wait to leave. I think she always resented that father left the ranch to me, even though she wanted nothing to do with it." "That must be lonely," Hannah said softly. "It is," Nathan admitted. "I have friends in town, other ranchers I do business with, but it is not the same as having someone to share your life with, someone who understands what you are working toward? Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of shared loneliness and the unexpected comfort they had found in each other's company. Hannah looked away first, her cheeks flushing as she returned her attention to her knitting. By the time the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, Hannah had completed 3 full rows of knitting. The stitches were uneven, and there were a few holes where she had accidentally dropped stitches, but it was recognizably knitting, and her pride was evident. "You are a natural," Nathan said. "Another few weeks, and you will be making complicated patterns." "I do not know about that," Hannah laughed. "But at least I'm making something that looks like fabric instead of a tangled mess." "Thank you, Nathan. Having you here has made all the difference." "When will you work on it again?" Nathan asked, already knowing what his next words would be. "I was thinking tomorrow afternoon if the weather holds." "I should get back to the ranch tonight," Nathan said slowly, "but I could come back to town in a few days. Would you mind if I checked on your progress?" Hannah's smile was answer enough. "I would like that. Very much." As Nathan rode back to his ranch that evening, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, he realized that something fundamental had shifted in his world. For 3 years, he had focused entirely on the ranch, on building something his father would be proud of, on proving he could succeed alone. But sitting with Hannah, watching her learn to knit, talking about their lives and losses, he had felt something he thought he had buried with his father: hope. The possibility of a future that included more than just cattle and solitude. Over the next 3 weeks, Nathan found excuses to come to Yosemite more frequently than his business strictly required. He told himself he needed to check on supplies, to meet with potential buyers, to discuss matters with the sheriff regarding rustlers in the area. But the truth was that he came to sit with Hannah on that bench outside the mercantile, to watch her knitting grow longer and more accomplished, to talk with her about everything and nothing. Hannah's scarf was taking shape, a long strip of uneven but earnest knitting that represented not just her growing skill but also the hours they had spent together. The knitting was almost incidental now. They talked about their dreams and fears, about what they hoped their futures would hold. Hannah spoke of wanting to open her own shop someday, perhaps selling dresses and knitted goods like her mother had. Nathan talked about expanding the ranch, about breeding better cattle, about building something that would last. "You should come see the ranch sometime," Nathan said one afternoon in late September as they sat together watching the activity on the main street. "It is beautiful this time of year, when the aspens are turning gold, and I think you would enjoy meeting my horses. I have a mare that is so gentle she lets the barn cat sleep on her back." Hannah looked at him with surprise and pleasure. "I would love that. But would it be proper? A young unmarried woman visiting a bachelor's ranch?" "I could arrange for Mrs. Chen from the boarding house to come as a chaperone," Nathan suggested. "She has been wanting to see the property anyway. She mentioned that her husband might be interested in buying beef directly rather than going through the market in town." "Then yes," Hannah said, "I would very much like to see your ranch." They arranged for the visit the following Sunday. Nathan spent the entire week in a state of nervous energy that his ranch hands noticed and teased him about mercilessly. He found himself cleaning the house more thoroughly than it had been cleaned in years, fixing the loose board on the porch steps, even picking wildflowers to put in a jar on the kitchen table before realizing that was probably going too far, and hiding them in the barn instead. When Sunday arrived, Nathan rode into Yosemite in his best clothes, his hair still damp from washing, and his hands scrubbed clean of the perpetual ranch dirt. He borrowed a wagon from the livery and collected Hannah and Mrs. Chen, an older Chinese woman who ran the kitchen at Hannah's uncle's boarding house and served as an unofficial grandmother to half the young people in Yosemite. The ride to the ranch took just over an hour, and Nathan spent the time pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the area. Hannah sat beside him in the wagon, her eyes bright with interest as she took in the landscape. The foothills were beautiful in autumn, the grass turned gold, and the scattered trees showing off their fall colors against the deep blue sky. "Oh, Nathan," Hannah breathed when the ranch came into view. "It is beautiful." The ranch house was modest, a sturdy wooden structure with a wide porch and a stone chimney, Beyond it stretched corrals and pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. The barn was well maintained, and a few smaller outbuildings completed the picture. In the distance, the Sierra Nevada mountains rose up, their peaks already dusted with early snow. Nathan felt a surge of pride as he helped Hannah down from the wagon. This was his, built by his father and maintained and improved by his own hands. Showing it to Hannah felt significant, like he was showing her a piece of his soul. He gave them a tour, introducing Hannah and Mrs. Chen to his ranch hands, who tipped their hats respectfully and clearly tried not to stare too obviously at Nathan's unexpected female guest. He showed them the barn, where the gentle mare he had mentioned immediately nuzzled Hannah's hand looking for treats. Hannah laughed with delight and spent several minutes petting the horse's velvet nose while Nathan watched with a softness in his expression that did not go unnoticed by Mrs. Chen's sharp eyes. They had lunch on the porch, a simple meal that Nathan had prepared himself with more care than he usually bothered with. Beef stew that had been simmering since dawn, fresh bread from the baker in Yosemite, and apple pie that Mrs. Chen had brought from the boarding house. As they ate, Nathan found himself talking about his plans for the ranch, ideas he had not shared with anyone because there had been no one who would understand or care. "I want to improve the breeding stock," he said. "Right now I am just raising cattle for beef. But if I could develop a stronger, healthier line, I could sell breeding stock to other ranchers. It would be more profitable and more sustainable." The market for beef fluctuates, but good breeding stock is always in demand. Hannah listened intently, asking intelligent questions that showed she was really thinking about what he was saying. "That sounds like it would require significant investment up front," she said. "Buying quality bulls, keeping detailed records of lineage and traits, but the long-term potential seems substantial." Nathan felt his heart expand in his chest. She understood. She saw not just what the ranch was, but what it could become. "Exactly," he said. "It would take 3 to 5 years before I would see real returns, but I think it would be worth it. I have been saving money, building up capital. Another year or two and I will be ready to start." After lunch, Nathan took Hannah on a walk around the property while Mrs. Chen rested on the porch with her knitting, serving as a distant but observant chaperone. They walked through the pastures, and Nathan pointed out different cattle, explaining what he was looking for in terms of size and health. Hannah asked more questions, and Nathan found himself explaining things he had never put into words before about his vision for the ranch's future. They ended up by a creek that ran through the eastern edge of the property, a pretty spot where cottonwoods provided shade and the water ran clear over smooth stones. Nathan had always loved this spot, had come here often after his father died when the weight of his new responsibilities felt overwhelming. "This is my favorite place on the ranch, he said. "When I need to think or just get away from everything for a while, I come here." Hannah looked around, taking in the peaceful beauty of the scene. "I can see why. It feels separate from the rest of the world somehow, like a secret place." "Not secret anymore," Nathan said softly. "I am glad to share it with you." Hannah turned to look at him, and the expression on her face made Nathan's breath catch. There was tenderness there, and wonder, and something that looked like the same feelings that had been growing in his own heart. "Nathan," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something. These past few weeks spending time with you, they have meant more to me than I think you realize. When I came to Yosemite, I felt so lost. Everything I knew was gone, and I was trying to build a new life in a place that felt foreign and strange, but you have made me feel less alone. You have given me something to look forward to." Nathan took a step closer to her, his heart pounding. "Hannah, I have to be honest with you. I did not come back to sit with you those first few times just to be kind. I came back because I could not stop thinking about you. You have become the best part of my days, and when I am not with you, I am thinking about the next time I will be. I'm falling in love with you, and I know it is fast, and maybe too soon to say such things, but I cannot help it." Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "It is not too soon. I feel the same way. I have been trying to tell myself it was too fast, that I barely know you. But my heart does not care about logical timelines. I am falling in love with you too." Nathan reached out and took her hand, the first time they had really touched beyond accidental brushes of fingers. Her hand felt small and warm in his, and the contact sent electricity through his entire body. "Can I court you properly?" he asked. "Can I come to Yosemite every Sunday and take you to church and sit with you afterward? Can I write you letters between visits and tell you everything I am thinking? Can I try to win your heart even though it seems like maybe I already have it?" "Yes," Hannah said, laughing through her tears. "Yes to all of it. I would like nothing more." Nathan pulled her gently into his arms, and she came willingly, resting her head against his chest. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other by the creek while the water murmured over the stones and the cottonwood leaves whispered overhead. Nathan felt a peace settle over him that he had not experienced since his father's death. This was right. Hannah was right. He was sure of it in a way he had never been sure of anything. When they finally returned to the house, Mrs. Chen took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly. On the ride back to Yosemite, Hannah sat closer to Nathan than strictly necessary, and he could not stop smiling. His future, which had seemed so clear and solitary just a month ago, now held possibilities he had barely allowed himself to dream about. True to his word, Nathan came to Yosemite every Sunday. He attended church with Hannah and her uncle, enduring the curious and approving looks of the congregation, and afterward they would spend the afternoon together. Sometimes they walked around town, sometimes they sat on their bench while Hannah worked on her knitting, which had expanded beyond the original scarf to include a blanket she was making for the boarding house. Always they talked, learning each other's stories, sharing their hopes and dreams, building the foundation of something that felt permanent and real. Nathan wrote letters throughout the week, long detailed accounts of ranch life that made Hannah laugh and sometimes cry. He wrote about the antics of his youngest ranch hand, a boy of 19 who was learning the trade and seemed to find new ways to get himself into trouble every day. He wrote about a difficult calving where he had stayed up all night to help a cow deliver her calf safely. He wrote about the sunset he had watched from the porch and how he had wished Hannah was there to see it with him. Hannah wrote back with equal dedication. She wrote about the guests at the boarding house, a rotating cast of miners, merchants, and travelers who provided endless entertainment and occasional drama. She wrote about helping Mrs. Chen in the kitchen and learning to make proper Chinese dumplings. She wrote about her progress with knitting and how she had started teaching another young woman in town, passing on the skill that Nathan had helped her master. She wrote about how much she missed him between Sundays and how she counted the days until she would see him again. October turned to November, and the weather grew colder. The mountains received heavy snow, and Yosemite prepared for winter. Nathan worried about the weeks when weather might make the trip to town dangerous or impossible, and he began to consider solutions to a problem he had not anticipated when he first fell in love with a woman who lived 20 miles away. One Sunday in mid-November, after church and Sunday dinner at the boarding house, Nathan took Hannah for a walk to the edge of town, where they could have some privacy. The air was crisp and cold, and Hannah wore a shawl she had knitted herself. The stitches even ensure now that she had mastered the skill. Nathan had a knitted scarf wrapped around his neck that Hannah had given him the week before, her first completed project after the practice scarf she had made while they first met. "Hannah," Nathan said, taking both her hands in his, "I have been thinking about the winter. There will be weeks when I cannot get to town, when the roads are impassable and it is too dangerous to travel. The thought of going weeks without seeing you is unbearable." "I have been thinking the same thing," Hannah admitted. "I will miss you terribly, but we will have letters and spring will come eventually." "What if you did not have to miss me?" Nathan said. "What if there was another solution?" Hannah looked at him with curiosity and dawning hope. "What are you suggesting?" Nathan took a deep breath. "Hannah Ashford, I know we have only known each other for 3 months, but they have been the best 3 months of my life. You have brought light and joy into my world that I did not know I was missing. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone. I want to spend every day of my life with you, learning new things together like we learned knitting, building a future side by side. Will you marry me?" Hannah's face transformed with joy. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Nathan, I will marry you. I love you so much, and there is nothing I want more than to be your wife." Nathan pulled out a ring he had been carrying in his pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. It had been his grandmother's ring, one of the few pieces of jewelry his father had kept after his mother died. A simple gold band with a small but pretty ruby set in the center. He slid it onto Hannah's finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. They sealed their engagement with their first real kiss, tender and sweet and full of promise. Nathan felt like his heart might burst from happiness. This woman, this incredible woman who had been teaching herself to knit on a bench in Yosemite, was going to be his wife. The wedding was planned for the first Saturday in December, before the worst of the winter weather set in. It was fast by most standards, but neither Nathan nor Hannah saw any reason to wait. They were sure of their feelings, and they wanted to start their life together as soon as possible. The next 3 weeks were a flurry of preparation. Hannah worked with Mrs. Chen and several other women from the boarding house to make her wedding dress, a simple but elegant gown of cream-colored wool that would be practical for a winter wedding while still being beautiful. Nathan made improvements to the ranch house, adding curtains to the windows and building a proper wardrobe for Hannah's clothes. He bought new dishes and cookware, wanting everything to be perfect for his bride. The whole town of Yosemite seemed invested in the upcoming wedding. The minister who would perform the ceremony was delighted, declaring that Nathan and Hannah were proof that love could bloom even in the harsh environment of the frontier. The mercantile owner donated supplies for the wedding dinner. The saloon keeper, who rarely showed his softer side, offered his establishment for the reception, promising to keep it respectable for the occasion. On the morning of the wedding, Nathan woke before dawn in his room at the boarding house, too excited to sleep. He dressed carefully in his best suit, a dark wool outfit he had owned for years but rarely wore. His hands shook slightly as he tied his necktie, and he had to start over twice before getting it right. His ranch foreman, a grizzled man named Tom, who had worked for Nathan's father for 20 years, knocked on his door. "Ready, boss?" Tom asked with a grin. "Last chance to run." "Not a chance," Nathan said firmly. "This is the best decision I've ever made." The wedding took place in the small church in Yosemite at 11 in the morning. Despite the cold December weather, the church was packed with townspeople, ranch hands, boarding house residents, and everyone else who had watched Nathan and Hannah's courtship with interest and approval. The wood stove in the corner worked overtime to keep the space warm, and someone had decorated with pine boughs and ribbon that filled the air with the scent of winter and celebration. Nathan stood at the front of the church with the minister, his heart pounding as he waited for Hannah to appear. When the door opened and she entered on her uncle's arm, Nathan felt his breath catch. She was beautiful, more beautiful than he had ever seen her. The cream dress complemented her auburn hair, which was styled in an elegant updo with small white flowers tucked into the curls. But more than her physical appearance, it was the joy on her face that struck him. She was smiling at him like he was the answer to every prayer she had ever whispered, and Nathan knew his own face reflected the same emotion. The ceremony was simple and traditional. They spoke their vows in clear, strong voices, Nathan promising to love and cherish Hannah for all his days, Hannah pledging herself to him in sickness and health, poverty and wealth. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and told Nathan he could kiss his bride, Nathan cupped Hannah's face gently in his hands and kissed her with all the love and tenderness he felt. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The reception at the saloon was a lively affair. Tables had been set up with food that the whole town had contributed to. A feast that included roasted beef, venison stew, fresh bread, vegetables, and multiple pies and cakes. Someone had brought a fiddle, and music filled the air as people ate and talked and celebrated. Nathan and Hannah were pulled into conversation after conversation, receiving congratulations and advice from people they knew well, and some they had barely met. Finally, as the afternoon sun began to sink toward the horizon, Nathan pulled Hannah aside. "Ready to go home?" he asked softly. Home. The word carried new meaning now. Home was not just the ranch anymore. Home was wherever Hannah was. They said their goodbyes and left amid a shower of rice and well wishes. Nathan had brought the wagon to town the day before, and he had packed it with Hannah's belongings, everything she was bringing from her small room at the boarding house to her new life as a rancher's wife. Now he helped her up onto the seat, spreading a thick blanket over her lap to keep her warm, and climbed up beside her. The ride to the ranch was quiet, both of them wrapped in their own thoughts and the magnitude of what they had just done. They were married. They belonged to each other now, and that belonging felt both thrilling and sacred. Nathan reached over and took Hannah's hand, and she squeezed his fingers, smiling at him with so much love that he had to look away before he drove the wagon right off the road from distraction. When they arrived at the ranch, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Nathan helped Hannah down from the wagon and on impulse swept her up into his arms to carry her over the threshold. Hannah laughed and wrapped her arms around his neck as he carried her into the house that was now truly their home. He set her down gently in the main room, which he had cleaned and prepared with care. A fire crackled in the fireplace, warming the space. Candles were lit on the mantel and table, casting a soft glow. Nathan had even found time to pick up those wildflowers he had hidden in the barn weeks ago, and fresh ones now sat in a jar on the kitchen table. "Welcome home, Mrs. Vance," Nathan said, and the name sounded so right, so perfect on his lips. "Home," Hannah repeated, looking around with wonder. "Our home." They spent the evening settling Hannah in, Nathan showing her where everything was kept, Hannah already making small changes that transformed the bachelor's house into a real home. She rearranged the kitchen to suit her preferences, unpacked her clothes into the new wardrobe Nathan had built, and placed small personal touches around the house, photographs and keepsakes from her life before. Later, after a simple supper and with the ranch quiet around them, Nathan and Hannah sat together on the sofa in front of the fire. Hannah had brought out her knitting, and Nathan watched as she worked on the blanket that was nearly finished now, her stitches swift and sure. "I was thinking," Hannah said as she knitted, "that I could teach the ranch hands to knit if any of them are interested. It is a useful skill for men too, especially during the long winter when there is less outdoor work to be done. They could make their own socks and scarves." Nathan laughed. "I am not sure how many of them would take you up on that, but I think it is a wonderful idea. You have already transformed my life in so many ways. Why not transform the whole ranch?" Hannah set down her knitting and turned to face him. "I am so happy, Nathan. Happier than I ever thought I could be again after losing my mother. You have given me not just a home, but a purpose, a future. I cannot wait to see what we build together." Nathan pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "We will build something beautiful," he promised. "A ranch that thrives, a family that grows, a life full of love and hard work and joy. Everything I dreamed of but never thought I would find." That winter was the happiest of Nathan's life. Despite the cold and the snow that sometimes isolated them for days at a time, he had never felt less alone. Hannah filled the house with warmth and laughter. She learned ranch work quickly, surprising Nathan and his hands with her willingness to help with everything from feeding animals to mending fences. She also established herself in the kitchen, cooking meals that were far better than anything Nathan had managed on his own, and occasionally experimenting with recipes Mrs. Chen had taught her that introduced the ranch hands to foods they had never imagined. On the evenings when snow kept everyone inside, Hannah did indeed teach two of the younger ranch hands to knit. They were hesitant at first, worried about being mocked, but Hannah's patient instruction and Nathan's approval made it acceptable. Soon, the living room would sometimes hold an amusing scene of cowboys sitting around the fire with knitting needles, working on scarves and socks while they talked about cattle and horses and the work that would come when spring arrived. Hannah also began working on more ambitious knitting projects. She made Nathan a warm sweater that he wore constantly, claiming it was the most comfortable thing he had ever owned. She made blankets for all the ranch hands, ensuring everyone had something warm for the cold nights. She even began designing her own patterns, experimenting with different stitches and techniques, pushing herself to improve the way she had pushed herself on that first day Nathan saw her on the bench in Yosemite. In February, a particularly harsh storm trapped them all at the ranch for over a week. The snow piled high against the buildings and the wind howled day and night. But inside, the ranch house was a haven of warmth and comfort. Nathan and Hannah spent long hours talking, playing cards, reading aloud to each other from the small collection of books Nathan owned. In those quiet, snow-bound days, Nathan fell even more deeply in love with his wife. She was endlessly interesting, full of stories and ideas and dreams. She challenged him intellectually, supported him emotionally, and made him laugh with her sharp wit and gentle humor. One evening during the storm, as they lay in bed listening to the wind, Hannah said, "Nathan, I have something to tell you." Something in her tone made Nathan's heart speed up. He turned to face her in the darkness. "What is it?" "I think I'm pregnant," Hannah said softly. "I'm not completely certain yet, but I have missed my courses and I feel different. I did not want to say anything until I was sure, but I cannot keep it to myself any longer." Nathan felt joy explode in his chest like fireworks. "A baby? Hannah, are you serious?" "I think so," Hannah said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Are you happy?" "Happy?" Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I am more than happy. I am ecstatic. A baby, our baby. When do you think?" "If I am right, probably late August or early September," Hannah said. "I will know for certain in a few more weeks." Nathan lay awake long after Hannah fell asleep, his hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. A baby. He was going to be a father. The thought was both terrifying and wonderful. He thought of his own father, of the lessons he had learned, of the kind of father he wanted to be. He would do everything he could to give his child the same solid foundation his father had given him, the same love and guidance and support. As winter slowly yielded to spring, Hannah's pregnancy was confirmed and her belly began to swell with their child. She continued to help around the ranch as much as she could, though Nathan and the ranch hands became increasingly protective, insisting she rest more and take on fewer physically demanding tasks. Hannah protested but eventually gave in, focusing her energy on preparing for the baby's arrival. She knitted constantly now, creating tiny clothes, soft blankets, and everything else a baby might need. Nathan built a cradle from oak, working on it in the evenings with care and attention to every detail. He sanded it until the wood was smooth as silk, not wanting any rough edges that might harm his precious child. In July, Hannah suggested they go to Yosemite for a visit before the baby came. "I want to see Mrs. Chen and my uncle," she said, "and I want to show them how happy we are, how wonderful our life is here. Plus, I would like the doctor to check on me just to make sure everything is progressing as it should." Nathan agreed, though he was nervous about the journey. Hannah was 7 months pregnant now, her belly round and prominent. But the weather was good, and they took the trip slowly, stopping often to rest. In Yosemite, they were greeted with excitement and celebration. Everyone wanted to hear about their life on the ranch, to congratulate them on the coming baby, to touch Hannah's belly and make predictions about whether it would be a boy or girl. The doctor examined Hannah and declared her healthy and strong. "The baby is positioned well," he said. "Barring complications, you should have a smooth delivery. Make sure you have someone with experience in attendance when the time comes." Mrs. Chen immediately volunteered to come to the ranch when Hannah's time grew near. "I have delivered many babies," she said firmly. "I will not let you go through this alone." They spent 3 days in Yosemite, visiting old friends and showing off Hannah's knitting projects, which had become quite accomplished. The mercantile owner asked if she would be interested in selling some of her work in his store, and Hannah agreed, pleased at the thought of contributing financially to the ranch even in this small way. On their last evening in town, Nathan and Hannah walked to the bench where they had first met. It looked exactly the same, weathered wood in front of the mercantile. But so much had changed since that August afternoon when Nathan had first seen Hannah struggling with her knitting needles. "A year ago, I was just arriving in Yosemite," Hannah said, sitting down on the familiar bench. "I was grieving my mother, uncertain about my future, trying to teach myself to knit because I had nothing else to do with my afternoons. And then you sat down beside me and changed my entire life." Nathan sat beside her, taking her hand. "You changed mine, too. I was so lonely, Hannah. I did not even realize how lonely I was until I met you. The ranch was my whole world, and it was a small, isolated world. You opened it up, made it bigger, made it mean something more." "Do you ever regret it?" Hannah asked. "Moving so fast, getting married so quickly? Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had waited, taken more time?" "Never," Nathan said firmly. "Not for a single moment. When something is right, you know it. I knew it that first day, and every day since has only confirmed it. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and our baby is going to be the second best thing." Hannah laughed and kissed him. "I love you, Nathan Vance. I am so grateful that you sat down on this bench with me and helped me learn to knit. Look where it led us." They returned to the ranch the next day, and as summer reached its peak, they prepared for the arrival of their child. Mrs. Chen came to stay at the ranch in late August, and Nathan was grateful for her presence. She took over much of the household work, insisting that Hannah rest and save her strength for the birth. On September 3rd, as the sun rose over the mountains, Hannah woke Nathan with a touch on his shoulder. "It is time," she said quietly. "The contractions started about an hour ago." Nathan shot out of bed, suddenly wide awake and terrified. "An hour ago? Why did you not wake me?" "Because you need your sleep, and there was nothing you could do yet," Hannah said practically. "But they are getting closer together now. You should get Mrs. Chen." The next 12 hours were the longest of Nathan's life. He paced the main room while Mrs. Chen attended Hannah in their bedroom, occasionally going outside to split wood or check on animals, anything to distract himself from the sounds of his wife in pain. The ranch hands stayed scarce, giving Nathan space to deal with his anxiety. Finally, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in brilliant colors, Nathan heard the unmistakable cry of a newborn baby. He rushed to the bedroom door but stopped himself from bursting in, waiting for permission to enter. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, Mrs. Chen opened the door with a huge smile on her face. "You have a son," she said, "a healthy, strong son, and your wife is tired but well. Come meet your boy." Nathan entered the room on shaking legs. Hannah was propped up in bed, looking exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had knitted. When she looked up and saw Nathan, her smile was like the sun coming up. "Nathan, come meet your son," she said softly. Nathan approached the bed and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket. His son. His child. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a scrunched-up face, and he was the most beautiful thing Nathan had ever seen. "Can I hold him?" Nathan asked, his voice rough with emotion. Hannah carefully transferred the baby into Nathan's arms, showing him how to support the small head. Nathan cradled his son with a tenderness he did not know he possessed, staring down at this tiny person who was somehow part of him and part of Hannah, a perfect blend of their love. "What should we name him?" Hannah asked. They had discussed names over the past months but had not settled on anything definite. Now, holding his son, Nathan knew exactly what the name should be. "William," he said, "after my father, William Vance. If that is all right with you?" Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "It is perfect. William. Hello, William. Welcome to the world, little one." Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, still holding William, and Hannah leaned against his shoulder. They sat like that for a long time, the three of them together, a family. Nathan thought about that day almost exactly a year ago when he had seen Hannah struggling with her knitting on a bench in Yosemite. If someone had told him then that within a year he would be married to that woman and holding their newborn son, he would have thought them crazy. But here he was, living a life more wonderful than anything he could have imagined. William grew quickly, a healthy and happy baby who rarely cried and seemed to find everything fascinating. He had Nathan's dark hair and Hannah's hazel eyes, and both his parents were completely besotted with him. Hannah managed motherhood and her other responsibilities with a competence that amazed Nathan, though he made sure to help as much as possible, learning to change diapers and soothe a fussy baby in the middle of the night. As William approached his first birthday, the ranch continued to thrive. Nathan had finally saved enough capital to begin investing in quality breeding stock, and his herd was improving. Hannah's knitting had become a small but steady source of additional income, with the mercantile in Yosemite selling her scarves, blankets, and sweaters as fast as she could make them. They were building the life they had dreamed of together, better than either had imagined possible. One evening in late August, almost exactly 2 years after they had first met, Nathan and Hannah sat on the porch watching the sunset while William played at their feet with wooden blocks Nathan had carved for him. The air was warm, and the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night created a peaceful backdrop. "Do you remember when I first sat down beside you on that bench?" Nathan asked. "You were so frustrated with your knitting." Hannah laughed. "I was ready to throw those needles into the street. I could not understand why something that looked so simple was so impossibly difficult." "And now look at you," Nathan said, gesturing to the basket beside Hannah's chair that held her current project, an intricate patterned shawl that would have been far beyond her abilities 2 years ago. "You have become an expert." "Only because you sat with me and believed I could figure it out," Hannah said. "If you had walked by that day, if you had not stopped, my life would be so different. I would probably still be living at the boarding house, working for my uncle, wondering if I would ever find someone to love. I would still be alone on this ranch," Nathan said, "working myself to exhaustion and telling myself I was content. But I was not content. Hannah, I was just existing. You gave me a reason to really live." Hannah reached over and took Nathan's hand. "We gave each other that. We saved each other, I think." William chose that moment to toddle over to Nathan, holding up a wooden block and babbling something that might have been an attempt at Papa. Nathan scooped him up, settling the boy on his lap, and William immediately grabbed for Nathan's hat. "I have been thinking," Hannah said, "that maybe William should have a brother or sister, not right away, but eventually. What do you think?" Nathan looked at his wife and son, at the ranch spread out before them, at the life they had built together from a chance meeting and a willingness to help each other learn difficult things. "I think that sounds perfect," he said. "Everything about this life we've created is perfect." And it was. The ranch prospered over the years that followed. Nathan's investment in breeding stock paid off handsomely, and the Vance Ranch became known throughout California for producing superior cattle. Hannah's knitting business grew as well, and she eventually taught several other women in Yosemite the skill, creating a small cooperative that produced goods sold as far away as Sacramento and San Francisco. William was joined by a sister, Sarah, when he was 3 years old, and then another brother, Thomas, 2 years after that. The ranch house expanded to accommodate the growing family, and it was always filled with the noise and chaos and joy of children learning and growing. Nathan taught all of his children to ride and rope, to understand the land and the animals, to work hard and treat others with respect. Hannah taught them to read and write, to appreciate beauty and creativity, to be kind and thoughtful. On William's 10th birthday, Hannah presented him with his first knitting needles and yarn. William made a face, clearly thinking this was not an appropriate gift for a boy growing up on a ranch, but Nathan sat down with him that evening and showed him how to cast on stitches, the way he had watched Hannah learn all those years ago. "Your mother taught herself this skill because it connected her to her own mother," Nathan told his son, "and I sat with her while she learned because I wanted to know her better. There is no shame in learning something new, even if it is not what you expect. Some of the most important moments in life come from being willing to try difficult things." William, influenced by his father's serious tone and the story behind the gift, gave it an honest try. He never became as skilled as his mother, but he did eventually manage to knit himself a lumpy but functional scarf, And more importantly, he learned the lesson Nathan had been trying to teach about patience, persistence, and the value of learning alongside people you love. As the years passed and Nathan's hair began to show silver at the temples, and Hannah's auburn hair gained streaks of gray, they would sometimes take an evening to ride into Yosemite together, leaving the children with the trusted ranch hands who had become like extended family. They would walk through the town, greeting old friends and seeing how things had changed, and they always made a point to stop at the bench outside the mercantile. Sometimes they would sit there for a while, Hannah occasionally bringing her knitting like she had on that first day, and they would remember how they had met, how they had fallen in love, how that chance encounter had shaped the entire trajectory of their lives. The bench became something of a local landmark, with young people in town referring to it as the romance bench and claiming it brought good luck to couples who sat there together. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Hannah by commissioning a small brass plaque that the town council agreed to attach to the bench. It read simply, "Here, in August 1878, Nathan Vance sat with Hannah Ashford and helped her learn to knit. They were married 4 months later. May all who sit here find the same patience, kindness, and love." Hannah cried when she saw it, and Nathan held her close the way he had been holding her for 20 years, steady and sure and full of love. "You have given me the most wonderful life," Hannah whispered against his chest. "Everything I have, everything I am, it all started because you were kind enough to sit with me and help me figure out those impossible stitches." "You had already figured them out," Nathan said. "You just needed someone to believe you could, and you have given me more than you will ever know. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just survival. You taught me that life is not meant to be lived alone, that the best things come from letting someone in and building something together." They stood there on the boardwalk in Yosemite, California, in front of that bench where everything had started, and they kissed the way they had kissed on their wedding day, full of love and promise and gratitude for the unexpected turns that had brought them together. Their children grew up and made their own ways in the world. William took over running the ranch when Nathan decided to step back, proving himself every bit as capable as his father. Sarah moved to San Francisco and opened a successful shop selling knitted goods and fine fabrics, building on the skills and business sense her mother had taught her. Thomas became a veterinarian, combining his love of animals with a scientific education, and he returned to Yosemite to practice, serving the ranching community his father had been part of for so long. Nathan and Hannah lived to see grandchildren, to watch their family tree spread and grow, to know that what they had built together would continue long after they were gone. They spent their later years in a smaller house on the edge of the ranch property, a cozy place with a view of the mountains and a porch where they sat every evening watching the sunset over the land they had loved. Hannah knitted until her fingers grew too stiff with arthritis, and even then she would sit with her needles, working slowly and carefully on small projects for her grandchildren. Nathan would sit beside her, reading aloud from newspapers and books, their comfortable silence punctuated by conversation about their children, their grandchildren, their memories. Nathan died first, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, and Hannah followed him just 6 months later. Their children said she had simply decided she was ready to join him, that living without Nathan was not really living at all. They were buried together in the Yosemite Cemetery, their shared headstone marking the years they had lived and the love they had shared. At the funeral, William told the story of how his parents had met, that August afternoon in 1878 when his father had stopped to help a frustrated young woman learn to knit. "My father always said that was the best decision he ever made," William said to the gathered mourners, sitting down on that bench, offering to help, opening himself up to the possibility of love. "He and my mother built a life together that was rich beyond measure, and they did it by approaching each other with patience, kindness, and a willingness to learn together. That is their legacy to all of us, not just the ranch or the business or the family, but the example of what love can be when two people truly commit to growing together." The bench outside the mercantile remained a landmark in Yosemite for generations. Young couples would sit there on first dates, hoping for some of the magic that had blessed Nathan and Hannah. Old couples would stop there to remember their own early days of courtship. The bench was replaced eventually as weather and time wore it down, but the new bench was built in the same style, and the brass plaque was carefully transferred, keeping the story alive. And sometimes on warm August afternoons when the sun slanted across the boardwalk in just the right way, people swore they could see the ghosts of a cowboy and a young woman sitting on that bench together, her hands moving with knitting needles, his face turned toward hers with an expression of complete devotion, forever captured in that moment when everything changed, when a simple act of kindness bloomed into a love story that would be remembered and retold for over a century. Because that is what real love does. It grows from small seeds, patient attention, and the willingness to sit with someone through the difficult parts, helping them figure out the stitches they think are impossible, believing in them when they doubt themselves, and building something beautiful together, one row at a time, until what you have created is so strong and intricate and lovely that it becomes a testament to the power of two hearts choosing each other and never letting go. The Vance family still runs the ranch to this day. Fourth and fifth generation ranchers who know the story of Nathan and Hannah by heart, who understand that their legacy is not just the land or the cattle or the business success, but the example of a love built on small kindnesses, quiet support, and the simple but profound act of sitting beside someone and helping them learn something new. And on special occasions, family members still visit that bench in Yosemite, sometimes bringing their own knitting projects, honoring the memory of the woman who taught herself a skill to feel close to her mother, and the man who sat with her until she got the stitches right, and who stayed beside her for the rest of their lives, learning together, growing together, loving each other with a devotion that time could never diminish. Their story became the heart of Yosemite's history, proof that the wildest, most beautiful adventures do not always involve gold strikes or gunfights or dramatic showdowns. Sometimes the greatest adventure is simply opening your heart to another person, taking a chance on love, and building a life together through all the ordinary and extraordinary moments that make up a human existence. Nathan and Hannah's love story was extraordinary precisely because it was built on ordinary moments made sacred by the attention and care they brought to each other. Every dinner shared, every evening on the porch, every challenge faced and overcome together, every child raised and every grandchild welcomed, added another row to the fabric of their life, until what they had created was a masterpiece of love, as intricate and beautiful and lasting as any work of art. And it all began because a cowboy saw a woman teaching herself to knit, recognized her determination and her vulnerability, and made the choice to sit down beside her and stay until she got the stitches right. That single choice, that moment of compassion and connection, rippled outward through time, affecting not just Nathan and Hannah, but their children and grandchildren and everyone whose lives they touched. It became a story told to remind people that love is not always dramatic or complicated, that sometimes it is as simple and profound as being present for another person, believing in them, and choosing them every day in small ways and large ways until your lives are so intertwined that you cannot imagine existing separately. That was the gift Nathan and Hannah gave each other and the world. The example of a love rooted in kindness, nurtured by patience, and sustained by an unwavering commitment to grow together rather than apart. And every time someone sits on that bench in Yosemite and reads the brass plaque, every time a visitor to the town hears the story and smiles, every time a member of the Vance family tells their children about the cowboy and the woman with the knitting needles, that love lives on, inspiring new generations to believe in the transformative power of simple acts of grace.